Welcome back to the Pique Your Interest podcast, the podcast where we seek to demystify all things mortgage and real estate related. I am one of your hosts, Tim Malauskas. I'm a loan officer here at the Millersville branch.
And I am Tanner Greenwalt with the Greenwalt team here at First Home Mortgage at our Millersville branch as well.
And we are coming to you today to talk about success stories. I think that a lot of times it's easy to get down on yourself or, the market is bad or business is slow or rates are rising or whatever. It's good to remind yourself of some of the success stories, some of the victories that you win along the way and some of the relationships that you build and the people that you help. Tanner's going to start. She has one of my all-time favorite success stories. And I hope you guys enjoy it as much as I do. Tanner, take it away.
Yeah. So, and I'm not going to give a lot of detail, obviously, because these are clients that we're talking about. But when Michelle and I were, working with this specific client, it was a little bit of a harder loan situation. So a little bit of backstory here. The client had just recently gotten out of prison from being incarcerated. He was incarcerated for a long period of time. And I had an agent who referred him, and he had said, is there anything you could do for this guy? He's been working, he was working, doing something, I don't know, I can't remember, for like 8 months, fresh out of prison. And I could at least show 8 months of income for him. But prior to that, obviously he was incarcerated. So I had to almost develop, Michelle and I, we had to develop a work history timeline for this guy, which can be hard, obviously, because, he was incarcerated. So, shy of proving that he had worked 8 months out of getting out, I had to develop this 2-year work history. So I'm thinking, in my head, I'm talking with Michelle, my team member. I'm like, how can we do that? What do they usually do when someone's incarcerated? Are they working while incarcerated? Are they learning? Because I know that there's school sometimes that's being taught there. So I had to literally get in contact with somebody from the prison system, not just one person, but a few of them. I had to develop a timeline of his working in prison, which he was. He was doing odd things here and there. So he was helping out, in the laundromat, but he was also helping out in the kitchen. So he had a work history, but, we've never had to actually prove that from somebody who's been in prison. So we don't know what that looks like. We don't know what we're looking for, kind of thing. So it's almost like we're throwing it to the wall and hoping it sticks, which sounds terrible, but we're here to help, obviously. So, after having multiple conversations with the people in the prison system, I was able to develop a work history, and Michelle and I put that together, and we were able to get the loan closed. And I think it's important to talk about that because people are human, things happen, and it just shows, I think, on the back end that, at least for Michelle and I, we're a team, so we're trying to have clients who are harder clients, and we are trying to get them to the finish line of purchasing a home. So for this client in particular, we felt good about it because it was a lot of hard work put into this loan. It wasn't a 30-day close. It was closer to a 60-day close. And when I'm telling you I had to call the prison, I'm shy of calling the prison warden being like, help me out here, we had to do our due diligence there. So moral of the story is it doesn't really matter what your situation is. There's a point when you can purchase a home, but there is also a starting point. So it's almost like us as, working in the mortgage industry, we got to work backwards to try to make the situation work for our clients. And in this situation, I feel like we definitely did as a team. So that's a success story that I wanted to share.
Yeah, that is wild. I mean, I've been in this business for 21 years, and I don't think I know anyone else who has ever had to talk to anyone at a prison to build a work history so that you can then help somebody obtain a mortgage.
Yeah.
That's crazy.
And
I love it, though.
Just to kind of give a little bit more, he was incarcerated for almost a solid 10 years, and not to give much of his information here, but
that's crazy.
I had to develop, a story of that. I had to go in, and I had to get certificates about the classes that he took. I had to get some form of pay stubs, from the people at the prison system. So it was a lot, Tim.
That's intense. That's intense. I'm proud of you.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much. But what about you? What's a success story that you feel is good to share and has some type of value to it?
I would say, so one of the things that the story that I like to tell people when they talk about, isn't it really easy to get mortgages for people? I mean, they have, money, they have a credit, they have a job. You should be able to get a mortgage for them. And a lot of times that's the case, but there are a lot of people out there that are challenged in one way or another, and part of our job is to figure out how to overcome that challenge or overcome that obstacle. So I had a client, this is years ago, it's probably, God, I don't know, 6, 7, 8 years ago, something like that. He had originally gone online and gotten a pre-qualification letter to write an offer for a house. He went to a rather large credit union. Website, filled out some information, it spit out a letter, it said he was approved for, I think, like $400,000. He wrote an offer on a $300,000 house over the weekend, and his offer was accepted because the pre-approval letter said this guy could buy $100,000 more than what he was offering. So the seller and the listing agent are like, well, that must be a slam dunk then. It would be a pretty easy loan. So come Monday, he takes the contract that's accepted, goes to the credit union, says, I've got a contract, now I want to buy a house. And they're like, okay, great, let's pull your credit. Credit score was a 520. For those of you that don't know, that is not a good credit score. That's not a credit score that most lenders are looking at.
Right.
620, 640, 660, something like that is kind of the baseline of the guidelines. Certainly some exceptions for that, but for the most part, 640-ish is what we're looking for. So he has this 520 credit score and a contract to buy a house, and all of a sudden he's like, well, what am I supposed to do now? I have a contract to buy a house. So his agent was like, well, I know this guy Tim, I think he might be able to help you, at least give him a call. Talked to the guy, pulled his credit, sure enough, he has a 520 credit score. But one of the things that's kind of cool about what happens when we pull credit is that the cover page to the credit report shows what your score is, but what the potential score improvement could be if you take, certain measures, steps A, B, and C or whatever. So it turned out that for very little money out of pocket, we could get this guy's credit score above a 640. So you can go from a 520 to a 640 like that. And I don't want to make it sound like that happens all the time, because it certainly doesn't. It's usually a much longer process, but everybody's credit report's different, everybody's situation is different, we're all unique. Sometimes it works out that way. So this one ended up working out that way. Got his score to, I think, a 637, if I recall. Had to switch the financing from conventional to FHA to make it make sense. But we were able to get his credit rescored, switch it to an FHA, and close all in 30 days. And I think that that's one of my favorite success stories, because it involves someone who was so dejected and so upset about not being able to buy a house, literally already had a contract. To turn that into a success story, I think, is something that the message is, it might feel like it's an uphill battle, or it might feel like you don't have a shot at getting a loan, but there are ways. The old saying, where there's a will, there's a way. It doesn't always pan out that way here. But I think if you're working with the right people and you have the right systems in place, you can do things like that. You can do a rescore and suddenly make a situation viable again. So that's one of my favorite success stories, because it actually involved, a real estate agent with a team that I ended up working with for years and years and years. And then that client obviously sent me some referrals over the years, friends and family, because of the job that I did. So, personal success story for them, personal success story for me, a real estate team that was happy. I think it worked out pretty well. So that's one of my favorite stories.
But I also think doing all that within 30 days, in our industry, that's a really hard thing to do. So that is a pretty cool success story, in my opinion.
Yeah, it all worked out about as perfect as you could.
Yeah.
Aside from the not being able to do it in the beginning.
Yeah.
Everything else went about as smoothly as you could possibly expect it to go.
Yeah, especially raising it 100 points and closing the loan in 30 days. That is.
I don't even think I've done that since. I don't think I've
Yeah.
had anybody's credit score rise so much in such a short period of time.
Quick, yeah.
Yeah, so that was pretty cool. What else you got?
So I can think of another success story that I have had, and this has happened with a couple clients, but this client specifically has stuck with me. So Michelle and we had a client who they decided to go through a program. They were under contract. They went through the Maryland Mortgage Program, and the loan was fine. It wasn't like it was a hard loan to close. The program we had a pretty good turn time when it came to sending the loan up to the program. They gave it back to us. We closed it within 30 days. Nothing really happened, I should say, with the loan part. It was more so the settlement part that I find the success in the story. So when I had gotten to settlement, and just to kind of backstory it, the client and Michelle and I, we were kind of back and forth throughout the whole month of them closing. And she was very grateful and she was super happy, but she was like a lot of questions, which is fine, but I could tell in some of the questions, it was like, the loan's closing, right? Like the program's going to accept, giving us money, right? Like, and I just kind of had to reassure her. So again, fast forward to settlement, we get to the settlement table and, she had her mom and dad there. She had her significant other there who was also on the loan. And, we're sitting there and the settlement proceeds on, everybody signs, we're good. They're given the keys. And the woman, who Michelle and I have been in contact with pretty much the whole 30 days, she looked at me and she was like, I just have to say something to you. And I was like, oh, okay, what's going on? Like, God, here it comes, But she was like, she basically said in a nutshell, like, I just really appreciate everything that you guys did. All the questions that you answered. I really, I was scared to purchase a home. I was scared to go through a program specifically because at the time, sellers weren't accepting contracts that had programs on them. It was like if you were going through a program and it was on your pre-approval letter, they were going to another offer that didn't have one. So she was super excited to get the offer accepted, but she started crying. She got super emotional. And the things she was saying to me were really nice and sweet. And it made me feel like she saw me, she saw me, she saw Michelle, she saw the work that we put into the loan. And I saw in her an emotional side to, like, as the buyer almost,
Right.
I think a lot of buyers, they want to show like, I'm good. I'm not scared. I'm buying a home. Like some people are buying it because they have money and they can buy a home. And some people are buying homes because they have to buy a home. Like they're getting kicked out of a rental situation, which is what was going on with this woman. She needed to be into a home. So she made me cry. I got not upset, but I was crying because she touched me in a way that like, it put into perspective why we do this job.
Right.
You can have emotions when it comes to being a buyer. Like we expect that. We expect the questions. We expect you to get a little bit emotional here and there. I almost like, I like that because I know that you're as invested as we are in helping you kind of thing. So that's something that really stuck with me. I loved that story. And that's happened a couple times, but that one specifically, like she was telling me she bought paint for her daughter's room and she was so excited. And I was like, oh my gosh, this is so cute. I love it.
Yeah, it definitely, it brings a human aspect to a business because we are in a business.
Right.
And it's usually, I think it's from the outside, it's viewed as a very transactional thing, but from the inside, we look at things as like the relationships that we build.
Right.
And the people that we help along the way. And I think that sometimes gets lost.
Yeah.
So it's always good to have a reminder like that, have a client like that that's truly grateful for the work that you put in.
Yeah, and you're going, like, typically a loan closes in 30 days. It's like 30 days feels like a long time, but it's really not that long.
No.
So it's like you're getting to know these people for about 30 days and then, you should be keeping up with the relationship, but it hits different when the people are grateful and you can see that they're grateful.
Correct.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. How about you? Any stories similar or anything you could think of?
Yeah, so this is one of the more wild stories that I can think of from my career.
We're here for it.
Yeah, so I got a referral from a real estate agent that I had known for years and years and years. And he's like, hey, I've got this buddy. He is, he's in the military and he just got back from Afghanistan. He wants to him and his wife want to buy a house. They have a growing family. I think you guys would be a good fit. So talk to the guy, talk to his wife, great conversation. I pull their credit and the husband's credit, the veteran's credit is awful. It is awful. And so I call him back because we had this great conversation. And one of the last questions I ask in a pre-approval conversation is, how do you think your credit is? And that usually spurs a conversation about, I'm mid 600s, or I've got flawless credit. I've never missed a payment or something like that. And that was kind of the conversation that I had with him. He was like, yeah, great credit. I always make my payments on time. I've never missed anything. I pay my credit cards off each month. And I was like, that's great. So when I pulled his credit and it was, in the 500s, I was like, something's not right here. So I called him back and we went over the credit report. And there's a section of the credit report that talks about like collection accounts and things like that. This guy had a foreclosure. And I was like, you didn't mention the foreclosure that you had. And he's like, I don't have a foreclosure. I was like, oh man, well, your credit report says that you do. So we talked about it. He actually came into the office. We went over his credit report and he's like, that is not mine. I don't know what else I'm supposed to do. It turns out that while he was over in Afghanistan, his dad took out a mortgage in his name.
Oh my Lord.
never once made a payment on that house, let it go to foreclosure, and was actually still living in the house at that time because it hadn't been completely foreclosed upon. The foreclosure process had not yet finished.
I'm like baffled.
The father
I
of this
know.
guy. Isn't that crazy?
That's, oh my gosh.
So we worked it out. We figured out that this was like obviously a case of fraud. The personal aspect aside, he still doesn't talk to his dad, which is kind of a sad thing, but
Yeah.
that's the reality of the situation, I guess. So we end up getting this cleared off of his credit. It takes a lot of work to get cleared off your credit because you've got to prove that there was actually something illegal going on. There has to be police reports and things like that. Finally got it off of his credit report, pulled his credit. Yeah, like 780 credit score.
Right.
Perfect credit. So we were able to help him buy a house after that. It took a few months to get through the process, but for me, it's a good reminder that things happen like that. Crazy things happen.
Yeah.
It's a good reminder that you should be diligent about making sure that your credit is good and that getting pre-approved by people like us is a great idea because you need to know where your credit stands. I've more than once, and this is an extreme case, obviously, but in other cases, you find that maybe somebody missed a payment. They think they have stellar credit, and they missed the payment when they're on vacation or something, and that happens. So, but the idea is to kind of get ahead of that. So get pre-approved ahead of time so that you know what that looks like. This couple, I would consider them friends at this point. I see them out and about around town. We don't ever joke about it because it's not something to joke about, but it's kind of funny that, the relationship that we've built over, the last decade or whatever it is, we see them on the sports field with our kids being around the same ages. So it's kind of cool that we built that relationship that we have from something that was such an awful circumstance to begin with. It's pretty cool to see that come full circle and to see them be happy now.
That is wild. Okay, so let me ask you this: Did I don't know if this question ever came about with you and him, but did you ever ask him if he had his credit pulled prior to even see any activity going on it?
No, that was the first credit pull he's had since he had been back.
So
he was completely shocked.
That's kind of a reminder to have people. There is a free lookup or free credit lookup that you could do. I think does Experian have one? I know Credit Karma does it once a year.
They all do. You can get a free credit report every year. I actually think some legislation was passed recently where you can actually get a free credit report every month.
Really?
Yeah, I'm pretty sure.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah, we'll have to look that up. We'll get back to you on that one.
Yeah, but either way, that's a great example of. Wow, that's a really terrible situation. You should be checking your credit at least once a year to kind of make sure stuff like that isn't going on.
Yeah.
I am baffled.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh.
It is, again, it's one of the more wild stories that I've been a part of.
Yeah, that is a wild story.
Yeah.
Thank you for sharing. My goodness gracious.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
I would say that the point of this is not to we're not patting ourselves on the back, although we do think that we do a good job.
Yeah.
It's more about we are real people. The people that we work with are real people. It's not just a transaction. You're not just a name or a number. You're an actual person. If we worked for a big national bank or, a bigger credit union, it's easy to just move on to the next person, to say, I'm sorry, your credit score is not good enough. Next.
Yeah.
We don't have that luxury in the position that we're in because we're developing relationships with the people that we work with real estate agents that refer us business. And we need to be doing everything that we can to make everyone in the transaction happy.
Right.
Obviously, we want to do it because that's what we do for a living, but we want to do it because it shows the goodwill that we have toward all the people that we work with. So I think sharing stories like this, if you're out there and you think that, I don't qualify for a mortgage or it's out of my reach for whatever reason, clearly there are some stories here that tell you otherwise. So don't hesitate to reach out. Don't be afraid to ask. I mean, clearly whatever you have going on is probably not the worst thing that we've ever seen.
Right. Yeah. And we're human too. We get a lot of things. We have families going on. We have situations going on. So things that people tell us, I think that they're a little hesitant, to tell us some things. And it's don't be. We're human. We understand it. Don't not be emotional about something. We get it, Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Don't be afraid. Don't be ashamed. We've likely seen something very similar before.
Yes.
And obviously we can overcome some of those things. So, certainly reach out. Let us know if there's anything that we can do to help.
Yeah.
Hope you guys got a lot out of this episode. I enjoyed it. I thought it was fun to hear your stories.
Yeah, I was still baffled. I'm like, what the heck? Yeah, but you can get a lot out of listening to stories like this, I feel like.
Yeah, feel good stories. Everybody likes those. All right. Well, thanks for joining us, and we'll see you next time. Bye.
Bye.